everybody's mad, Trump should really call for calm. Joe Biden said, let's put a bullseye on Trump's back. Joe Biden said twice, I'd like to take him out and beat him up behind the high school gym. He was the one, remember, that called half the country garbage. So that's what they wanted, and they got that agenda, and now they don't have him anymore, and they lost the election, and it only worked for 4 years, and now it's very unpopular, and I think people are sick of it all.
What we're about to look at isn't theoretical. It's already happening, just not where the cameras are pointed. Now, the perspective of someone who's been following this closely.
If you look at the Biden administration, that was a heaven-sent gift to the left. That was their most never in their wildest dreams did they think that they could actually stage a near coup and put this waxen effigy up, stick him in the basement, say it was COVID, outspend Trump $3 billion to $1.5 billion, get him elected, use him as a stiff sort of that Star Trek character, and then take this hard left agenda and just push it down the American people's nose. Get Mayorkas to destroy the border, get the green people to destroy fossil fuels if they could, get out of Afghanistan in humiliation, tilt toward the radical Palestinians, empower Iran. All of that they got through.
Once the last illusion of stability is gone, it'll be too late. And looking at where we are now, it feels like that's exactly the plan.
And then they unleashed him. Every once in a while they said, he's not senile. He's not, look at this. We're going to have him do a Phantom of the Opera so he would rest, and then he would go up, sit my badges and drink garbage, and they loved that. And then they would put him back, and so they only brought him out in moments of clarity to express invective and hatred. Everybody's mad, Trump should really call for calm. Joe Biden said, let's put a bullseye on Trump's back. Joe Biden said twice, I'd like to take him out and beat him up behind the high school gym. He was the one, remember, that called half the country garbage. So that's what they wanted, and they got that agenda, and now they don't have him anymore, and they lost the election, and it only worked for 4 years, and now it's very unpopular, and I think people are sick of it all. And Trump, what they really don't like about Trump is, I think, one of the weirdest things, they think he's going to be this right-wing fascist, and then he's the only major political figure who expressed humanitarian concern about the dead in Ukraine. For the left, it was always Ukraine was something weird tied into Russian collusion. Well, we're going to support Ukraine because we hate Putin, because Putin colluded with Trump, and that'll make Trump look bad as Putin's puppet. But they didn't care about the 1.5 million people dead or wounded or the destruction that was caused. He did. Trump did. And so if he had been, Obama or John Kerry or somebody, they would have given him a Nobel Prize for that alone.
So when Trump showed a rare humanitarian concern for Ukraine, it shattered their narrative. To the left, Ukraine was never about lives lost. It was about linking Putin to Trump and keeping the collusion story alive. That's why they despised him for saying what they would have praised in anyone else. And it's the same pattern at home. Their obsession with destroying Trump drives them to defend the indefensible, from failed appointees to corrupt officials, simply because hatred blinds them to reason.
Well, it was very clear what they were doing. They were completely creating jobs so that Biden-Harris, and then Harris would be reelected as a booming economy. And then when that didn't work, they were going to say to everybody that Trump inherited a booming economy. And look, now in unemployment, there's all these jobs that were lost, and they were never there in the first place. And he knew that. And the other ability of Trump is he makes them, because of their irrational hate, defend the indefensible. They defend people who cannot be defended. And so whether it's, making them defend Mohammed Khalil or Abrego Garcia or Luigi Mangione or this Lisa Cook on the Fed or Latita James, they will defend these people, or Fannie Willis. But they're losing causes, all of them. But he makes them do that because in their mind, I hate Trump so much that I will be against anything that he is for. And when you have that predetermined deductive attitude and he's for where 70% of the popularity on most of the issues is, then what you're basically doing is, in robotic style, I'm always going to be on the wrong side of the issues because I hate Trump. And that's what's happened to them. All this doesn't mean, everybody, that the Republicans are going to win the midterms. It's very hard historically to keep a majority, a close majority, the end party during a midterm, but it does mean that he has a good shot at it. And I think he can pull it off. I really do.
This is the paradox. Trump's critics are so consumed by hatred that they reflexively oppose whatever he supports, even when it aligns with common sense and enjoys majority approval. That rigidity blinds them and often leaves them on the wrong side of the issue. And yet, contrast that with figures abroad like Prince Charles, once reliably anti-Trump on climate and foreign policy, but pragmatic enough to recognize when unity and duty to country must outweigh personal or political dislike.
Prince Charles, I mean, everything that Prince Charles has said from, the Middle East to global warming is anti-Trump, but he's very astute, like his mom. And I didn't think that he understands that it's in his interest to support, court, and win over people that he may not like, and he does not like their politics, but on one critical issue, standing tall for England and supporting Great Britain through thick and thin, he would prefer Trump to Biden or Obama. And he knows that. And that's hard for a person to know, to say, oh, I love Obama. I love what the Biden left. I'm there, and they're climate changers like me and everything. But if we were ever in trouble, they wouldn't lift a finger, but this guy would.
Trump's critics never admit it, but they know he would have acted where Obama and Biden did not, and that contrast exposes their weakness. Yet, while America debates its own failures, abroad another troubling shift is unfolding. Leaders like Keir Starmer, joined by Canada and Australia, rush to recognize Palestine, not from strength but from political calculation. Immigration and captive voting blocs drive these moves, even as the recent massacres and atrocities are quietly overlooked or excused.
Starmer of the UK, along with Canada, along with Australia, have stated today that they are going to recognize, these countries are going to recognize Palestine as a state. Part of the news angle was Starmer is seeking to get out in front of Macron of France, who stated last week that France was going to recognize. So you have four not unimportant countries going to recognize this hellhole as a nation. Your thoughts, Victor?
I think there's at least two things going on behind those stories. One, obviously, they all have left-wing governments, all of them. So I'm not sure that we should fault the Australian, half the country of Australia or Canada or the UK. And the other is immigration. They've let in so many people. Australia not quite as much as Canada, but the UK, and they are captives to the Muslim voters. So that's another thing. But just think about it, is Hamas is now, they publish these pictures and they're just saying to everybody, on October 7th, we broke into a country and we slaughtered 1,200 people at a time of peace. And many of us were working with Israel. 20,000 of us were treated very well. We crossed the border and were working. And we just slaughtered them. And then we took 240-something prisoners, and we've been doling them out for political purposes. And you're not going to get work because we're thugs and terrorists. You're not going to get the other 45. And then I would ask the governments of these three English-speaking countries, how many countries do you recognize where the government takes hostages as terrorists? How many do you do that? Because that's what they're doing. And when they want a separate state, they want this terrorist state, because that's what's going to happen if you allow a separate state in Gaza. So, if somebody did that to the UK or Canada, came into their country, murdered 1,200 people, and then stuck their tongue out and wagged their finger at them and said, we've got hostages, what are you going to do about it? I think they'd be very upset. And it's really weird. We're going to talk about Trump's solid polls, but one of the reasons that they're solid is for all of the anger at him from the left. He has a moral compass, and on these main issues, you don't take hostages. There is a difference between a constitutional democracy in Israel and a bunch of thugs in Hamas. He makes that clear, and Europe is not doing itself any good, no matter how in extremist they are, by buying oil from Russia. And we can't really help you hurt Russia if you continue to buy oil and then lecture everybody about how well you're doing in Ukraine. So he brings these things up. That's why his polls are increasing. And that's not even the domestic issues, about crime and energy and the border.
He draws sharp lines. Israel is a constitutional democracy. Hamas is a band of killers, and Europe gains nothing by lecturing on Ukraine while funding Russia through oil. These points fuel his rising poll numbers because they cut through hypocrisy. But the same clarity often collides with history's illusions. Think of Michel Foucault, who once romanticized Khomeini as a revolutionary ally for the West, ignoring both the brutality of the Shah and the reality of what would follow in Iran.
But he was captive of, all sorts of people. Even Szynski was. All of the people around him were infatuated with this Michel Foucault kind of narrative that Khomeini was a revolutionary that was reaching out to the West, and he could be a very valuable person in Iran, and the Shah was not really a good person. He was killing thousands of people with Savak, which wasn't true. He was a brutal dictator, but he was not a killer, as Khomeini was. So that's what they fell for, and they were all deluded. And then we had that diaspora of mostly Jewish Iranians or conservative Iranians that got smart and fled when they saw that Shah was not going to make it. And those are the people you bump into in their 70s and 80s, and they own businesses, they're professionals. And then you get the other wave of Iranian diaspora, and these are the people who said, well, we don't like Khomeini, but he was a useful theocrat for our socialist utopia that's going to follow. Mossadegh, they keep talking about that. So then they stayed, and they thought that they were outsmart. There was Bani Sadr and maybe Ghotbadi, and they killed Ghotbadi, they almost killed Bani Sadr, and then that failed, and they found out, oh my God, Khomeini and these guys are really medieval theocrats, and they don't like socialism, but we hate America more than they do, and they're still going to kill us. So then they fled to where? Of course, they fled to America, some to Europe, but to America. And they are mostly in journalism and academia, and they're younger, and they're in their 50s and 60s. So there's two diasporas that I've encountered, and one is very, very pro-American and very, very anti-Khomeini, and the other is ambiguous and blames the United States for everything in Iran.
The story of Iran's diaspora shows how illusions collapse. Some fled early, knowing the Shah's fall would bring something darker. Others stayed, convinced they could outsmart Khomeini or bend his theocracy towards socialism, only to realize too late that medieval clerics despised them as much as America. These competing exiles carried their bitterness abroad, shaping media and academia with conflicting loyalties. And the same clash of illusions now echoes across the West. From Wilders in the Netherlands to Farage, Maloney, and Orban, a larger movement pushes back against self-denial. Meanwhile, in places like Dearborn, identity politics distorts reality, while figures like Ilhan Omar recycle empty narratives, hating America first rather than facing the facts.
But I think it's part of a larger wave. You see Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, you see Neil Farage, Maloney, Viktor Orban, and then the efforts to squash it. But it's a holistic movement in Europe and the United States, and we are sick of all this. We have nothing to apologize for. We're not settler colonialists. Go look at what the Ottomans did when they were. You people never mention the Ottomans. You never mention the Caliphate. All you do is Europe, 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 West, 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 West. And yet you want to come here. All you do is trash our country, our civilization, and then you beg to come here. We have the same problem. I mean, the mayor of Dearborn in that infamous city council meeting where the mayor just told that one guy who was objecting to honoring somebody who had been affiliated with Hamas, he said, "You don't belong here in the United States," and to a U.S. citizen, because there's a majority Muslim population in Dearborn. I would like to remind him there is not a majority population of Muslims in the United States. So Dearborn is not the United States in terms of demography. And then we had Ilhan Omar basically say, and I predicted this. I went through with Sammy 7 different narratives about the Charlie Kirk killing. First they were going, and I did it on X, first nobody was at fault, that didn't work, and then the MAGA was at fault, that didn't work, and then the gun did it, bolt action hunting rifle, responsible for about 1% of all murders in the United States. That didn't do it. Then Trump himself did it, that didn't do it. Then it was the gay love story, Ally McGraw, Ryan O'Neal kind of, that they were in love when they were... That didn't do it. And then finally they got to where they really wanted to be. And that was blank you. I don't like Charlie Kirk. He is a fascist. I'm not going to quote what he said or anything. I'm just going to hate him, and I'm not going to participate in this fraud. And that was what Ilhan Omar blasted out in Congress, said that basically he was a Frankenstein monster, Dr. Frankenstein whose monster blew his neck apart, gross and vile. And then we had Rashid Tlaib, who goes on her rants, and then AOC.
When Ilhan Omar raged in Congress, calling him a kind of Frankenstein's monster, grotesque and broken, it wasn't just crude rhetoric. It was emblematic of a broader pattern. Rashida Tlaib carries on with the same tired lines, and AOC follows suit, each one amplifying a chorus of disdain. People watch this, and what they feel isn't just disagreement, it's exhaustion. They're tired of being told that their history and traditions are illegitimate, that their values must be discarded. And they see the irony: waves of migrants arriving in Europe, rejecting the very customs that made Europe a place they wanted to reach in the first place. The same contradiction now plays out in America. Many arrive from the Middle East not simply to live in peace, but to rally in defense of terrorist groups, openly undermining the nation that granted them refuge. And when officials timidly suggest, if you despise this place, perhaps return home, they're accused of cruelty.
And I think people are just getting tired of all that, They don't like the idea that people flock to Europe and then they act in a particular way against its traditions and history and values and protocols, which, if they were to get their way, would destroy the reason why they came there. The same thing was true of us. And, why do these people come from the Middle East and then they get here? And I'm not talking about citizens alone, but they're on visas or green cards, and then they start demonstrating for this terrorist organization, and they start attacking this country. And then when you politely, in the State Department, say, you're on a green card, you're on a visa, Mr. Mohammed Khalid, would you please go back home? Because you obviously don't like the system here, because you came over to get an education, and all you do is attack the United States foreign policy and blast its allies and praise a terrorist organization. No, you can't do that to me. You can't do that to me. I want to come here and attack your country. It's like inviting somebody in. He said, I hate your table, I hate your food, I hate you, but you can't kick me out. And the same thing with Ilhan Omar. That's, I'm just going on a rant, but you think of all the things that DI does. I don't think we've really appreciated the toxicity of that ideology. It basically says we are not going to enforce norms, customs, laws to a particular group of people who are self-declared historical victims by the basis of their historical oppression, but more importantly, their superficial appearance in the here and now. So if you are a non-white person, you are going to get an exemption. That means you can be the mayor of LA and you can be in Ghana and no one's going to criticize you. You can be Teresa Stokes, the magistrate that let out DeCarlos Brown to kill Irania Zarutska, and you don't even have to pass the bar to be a judge. You can be the head of LA Water and Power and have a dry reservoir, no problem. You can be the deputy mayor of Los Angeles and be under house arrest when the fire hits because you phoned in a bomb threat. You can be Carlos Brown and let out 14 times and prey on people and no one's going to say a word. And I think people are sick of it.
What frustrates people is the double standard. The promise of equity has morphed into blanket immunity. If you're in the right category, you can fail upward, become a judge without passing the bar, run utilities into the ground, or hold office while under house arrest. Violence, fraud, or negligence. Excused so long as it fits the narrative. That's why ordinary Americans feel betrayed. And Ilhan Omar's story becomes the perfect example. Allegations that she manipulated immigration law, possibly even through a fraudulent marriage, get dismissed because she checks the right boxes. Add to this the $2 billion Somali food aid scandal in Minnesota. Had this been poor whites in Appalachia, the jails would be full. Instead, ideology, race, and gender act as shields. The same pattern extends to the cultural obsession with identity politics. Even violence is recast. Look at how an attempted assassin targeting Brett Kavanaugh was portrayed, shifting motives to fit a more comfortable storyline.
Ilhan Omar, there's an argument to be made, Scott Johnson has done it and others, that she manipulated immigration law to get here by de facto marrying her brother to get a visa to come here. And that was exempt because who she was. The same thing about the Somali $2 billion food fraud in Minnesota. If that had been some white Appalachians that were running that, they'd all be in prison. And so there's an exemption, ideological, racial, gender, etc. And when you see the number of people, since the trans craze started, I don't mean that they're crazy, I mean this popularity of it in the last 10 years, and you look at shootings, you have 5 or 6 of them. And as you pointed out to me, Jack, we now know that the assassin who was going to kill Brett Kavanaugh has now transitioned, and we know that Tyler Robinson was in a relationship with transgender and had such messaging on his casing, and yet no one can talk about this. You cannot talk about it. That they are, in the last 5 or 6 years of violent shooting, they are overrepresented, at least on their percentages of gender dysphorics in the population. It's like, I don't know, 1 in 100,000, if that, prior to this redefinition of it. I think what I'm trying to get at, Jack, in Europe and the United States, people said, I had enough. We are a force for good. You look at the world outside of the West, it's a mess. Everybody wants to come to the West. They're not flocking to go to China. They're not trying to get into Russia. They're not trying to get into Angola. They're not trying to get into Venezuela. They're not begging to get into Mexico. They want to come here, and there's a reason for that. But you don't ever tell us what the reason is. You only talk about the bad stuff because you want stuff from us. And then we're supposed to feel really terrible and guilty. Okay, we'll give you special admissions. Okay, we'll give you a visa. Okay, we'll give you a fellowship. And it's a very dangerous ideology because it cost a young Ukrainian woman her life, because that guy should have never been out. And that woman who let him out, Teresa Stokes, should have never been a judge. And that mayor should never have been a mayor. I mean, she was elected, so be it. But when she said, you can't arrest your way out, we don't want to show the video, let's not blame anybody. It's that ideology that causes this stuff.
At the heart of this crisis lies an ideology that excuses failure and shields incompetence under the banner of victimhood. People don't beg to move to Mexico. They fight to come here. Yet instead of acknowledging why, we are told only stories of guilt, oppression, and demands for special treatment, visas, stipends, exceptions. That worldview has consequences. A young Ukrainian woman lost her life because a dangerous man was released by a judge who never should have been on the bench. A mayor, elected in the name of compassion, dismissed the very idea of accountability. You can't arrest your way out, she said, as if slogans could replace justice. This isn't mercy, it's ideology, and ideology kills. And as these failures pile up, the left's political weakness grows. Lacking a message that resonates, they turn to disruption and chaos, hoping fear will win them back the power they've lost.
It's going to get worse, Jack, because it also reflects the political impotence of the left and the frustration. They have a message now that nobody wants, and they know that. So they feel that they can cause so much chaos. They can attack ICE and cause so much disruption that people say, just make it go away, please. That's their whole strategy. But nobody wants what they have on the border, on energy, on foreign policy, on the economy, nothing. And they know that. And that's why they don't have the Congress and they don't have the White House. And they think they can cause enough mayhem and chaos to get into the House and Senate in the midterms. I don't think they can. And so that frustration says, well, then if we don't have power and people don't like our message, then we should use violence.
The left's impotence breeds chaos. When their message fails, they stir disorder, hoping fear will return them to power. But chaos isn't strategy, it's desperation. And in that vacuum, another force rises. The tech elites. Musk, Thiel, Bezos, Zuckerberg. All products of a corrupted academic pipeline, all facing mobs of radical graduates. Their uneasy alliance with politics reveals the same rot. Ideology over competence, survival over principle.
The only thing that's very strange is there's one institution that's really pushing back, and that's Silicon Valley. Because when you look at David Sachs or Andreessen or Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, even to a lesser degree Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, I think they all got in a room just creating a scenario, and they said, these people hate us, and they are communist socialists, and they're not very good. They come out of these universities, and we keep thinking we're hiring Harvard, Yale, Princeton, but they don't know how to speak, they don't know how to write. They're all products of an inflated, overrated educational system, and they're all ideological driven, and they camp out with a tent in our HR department and complain. And they get on social media and trash our brand, and then we meet with their representatives, and they're socialists, and they say, you are going to do this, and you are going to do that, and you're going to hire us when we retire, and you're going to do AI this way, and this madman Trump comes along and says, whatever you want to do, as long as you bring jobs back here and you don't outsource and offshore, and you are USA all the way, and I'll protect you overseas. And they said, okay. So that's a little, and I know people are going to get angry and say, well, Victor, don't believe those guys. They're Silicon Valley. They've done a lot of damage. I know that. But it's one thing that at least is becoming introspective by needs. And these other institutions, they've just destroyed.
They realize as Elon Musk showed with X, didn't he get rid of 90% of the staff?
Yeah,
so these places are kind of welfare reservations for MBA geeks who are highly paid, and maybe they
so
as businessmen they
about,
realize that's not needed anymore.
Isn't it weird about the left? I mean, here he was an icon for giving them the best electric vehicle in the world, and then they started trashing his deal, and now they don't, because he just, I guess, disappeared from the White House. So now they sent out from party command headquarters their bunker somewhere and said, stop trashing Elon. It's bad publicity. It's still a car that's better than gas. You're now permitted to buy it. You don't have to key it. You don't have to run people off the road. You don't have to firebomb dealers. It's okay. It's just amazing. Almost every day, just let off a rocket, and I don't know how many new satellites went up. And as I said, I'm speaking to you on Starlink from out in the country, and he saved NASA. We now have a space program because of him. We now have internet because of him. We now have an alternative, if you think that's wise, go ahead, to a gas engine car that actually runs, and it can go 300 miles, and it's a wonderful car. It's very reliable. He did all of that. Now you have X, and you can post on there, and you can see the alternative. Blue Sky turned into what they said X was going to turn into, but it didn't. It's a complete cesspool of hatred. And so, Blue Sky or whatever it is. So it's amazing he did all of these things, and I know that he had a falling out with Trump, but I still really admire him. I know he's quirky and everything, but he did